Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Amherst Williams, the Executive Director of the Connecticut League of Museums, and I want to welcome you all to today's program on how a good job posting can help your organization. Um, we are joined today by three amazing women who are doing great work in different sectors of the museum world. And the idea for this program really came from conversations that we had all been having at the League conference, at the NEMA conference, at GEM events, and in sidebars that we've had with other colleagues in the field about the real impact that job postings can have, not just for the people who apply for jobs, not just for the organizations that post them, but really for the wider field as a whole. And as we were in the process of creating a new self-service job board on the League website to kind of complement the New England Museum Association's job board, the AASLH job board, and allied job boards in places like the Museum Association of New York. We really wanted to start building out some resources, both for job seekers and for organizations posting opportunities, whether paid or unpaid. And just to provide some of those resources. So we think of this as the beginning of a conversation. And we don't think of this program as necessarily being something that's going to give you everything you need to know about jobs and job postings, but as a real place to begin thinking. So I want to introduce who we have with us today. We have with us Lori Pastriak, who many of you in Connecticut probably already know, a seasoned museum professional, former director of the League, and currently working with Museum Search and Reference, one of the big search firms for museum jobs in the United States and perhaps even internationally. Lori can tell us more about that. Elise Couture-Stone, who is with the Gender Equity in Museums movement, which provides a lot of resources and that has personally, for me, in my role with the League and with building out our jobs board, really influenced the work that we are trying to do and guiding best practices on, how your job postings can really shape the field. And Scarlett Hoey, who is also involved with GEM, but whose main role is with the New England Museum Association. And some of you may have encountered these folks at conferences or in the field, but I really think we've put together a great group of folks to start a conversation here. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to, who's first?
I'll be up.
Okay, great. Scarlett is kicking us off.
Great. So a quick roadmap of where we're going, and I'm very excited to say also I'm joined by my colleagues at NEMA, Jennifer Wilson and Heather Riggs. So thanks, team, for being here. Quick roadmap, we're going to be doing introductions, as Amherst just said. I'm going to do a quick data dive, and then Lori's going to be Lisa's going to actually be discussing some of the language around gendered posts. Lori's going to be talking about different job opportunities, and then we're all going to be kind of doing a Q&A and talking about ways to improve job postings. So with that, I'm going to request remote control from Amherst and dive into a little bit of data. And I should start off that, with my role at NEMA and through GEM, although I know a lot about data and numbers and stats, I am not an expert, but we can get there together and find solutions together. And I wanted to start with a big picture that beyond, the Northeast and beyond the States, looking over to our friends across the pond at the UK and how they look at gender and discuss gender in museums and the pay gap. And one way that they do this is through actually a website that serves institutions with 250 folks or more, which includes some of our larger museum friends. And I have big dreams one day that it would be very interesting if the government here in the States did something similar, because this gender pay gap report not only records our larger institution museum colleagues in the UK's pay gaps, but it does retail businesses and companies and larger organizations. So just as a vision for where one day maybe we could go is to think about what it would look like for a larger data dive of information to really examine what the pay gap would look like in our institutions. And like I said, this is only for the 250 or larger institutions, but I think it's still a really interesting place to consider. And there we go. I don't know if hopefully you all can see some of this, but it collects the mean and the median for those larger reporting institutions like the VA or the Globe or Museum of London, and you can explore all this data, going back. I think it's like 6 years or so, and it's all on the UK website. But it's a really interesting starting point. So although they don't list salaries specifically, they're giving you the rough quartiles of where folks are landing in the breakdown based on gender. Looking, back here at home in the US, we know that overall women are paid less than men. The Bureau of Labor Statistics continually produces reports about the breakdown based on gender wage gap and also across race and ethnicity. Coming closer to home to museums, we know throughout the last couple of years that there have been a number of different reports on salaries, whether it's the Art Museum Salary Transparency back in 2019, which was more of a fill-in for folks and an accessible Google sheet. There was the more updated version, which was the part-time and contractor transparency worksheet, which was last year's iteration. And actually, right now there's a call for it's around art museums specifically, but it's the museums moving forward, and they have an upcoming deadline of October 4th. So this work is still being done around, salary transparency, wage equity, and our colleagues, not only in art institutions, but in the Children's Museum and in the sciences are also collecting this information. I'm not going to read all the data points, but these are more just resources for you to continue to explore. My very soft spot is uplifting some of the work of the early museum salary surveys with my GEM and NEMA hat on. So, at an age of 34, Cornelia Quinton held down the fort in collecting some of the salary survey data and started launching AAMD's initial salary survey. So they do have a long history of exploring what that information looks like for the field. And here in the Northeast, NEMA also has a very long history, although I would be very curious, since you all are coming from Connecticut, if you've seen the 1975 Wadsworth Athenaeum Salary Survey report. I haven't found it yet, but it is actually the inspiration for the New England Museum Association Salary Survey. So, if you know somebody in the archives at the Wadsworth, or you yourself might have had the 1975 report somewhere in your holdings, I think the NEMA team would be very interested in learning more from those archive documents. But the New England Museum Association, the New England Conference, as we were called, started launching our salary survey in the late 1970s, inspired by that Wadsworth Athenaeum poll. We were running workshops around the topic throughout our time of running it. I love the would you like to see what's behind this chart, and trying to provide resources for our broader Northeast museum community. Some of the early data that is in our archives and then recorded in more recent, more recent reports. I don't know why that skipped ahead. I don't know how to go back though. How do I go back? Let's go. Sorry, remote control access. There we go. Early reports show that there were fewer identifying females reporting to the earlier salary survey data. We don't know if this is because, with the range and breadth of institutions that were contacted. So, it's important to take all this data with a grain of salt and as one data point among many and as one resource among many. But I think, you can see the growth of the industry as, GEM colleagues would say, is turning more pink collar. And let's see if this works to advance ahead. Give me 1 minute. Hope it's not going to skip. There we go. And with that data deep dive as well, we saw that, in the 70s, of the female executive directors that were reporting, none of them worked at large institutions. And we have historically seen that data reflective in similar data points like AAMDs as well. Looking at the breakdown of salaries over time, it's important to also see the fact that a lot of institutional budgets, we know women were predominantly working at smaller historical societies, and that can also affect the budget breakdowns in the reporting of salaries. When we think about the gender gap as it relates to those breakdowns, the median male director incomes also would sometimes include, housing or other information that maybe wasn't a benefit to a female executive director as well. But it's still pretty stark, the differences between, even the median female director salary and the male director salary. So like I said, we know women are paid less than men statistically. And although this NEMA survey is just a snapshot in time, we can see it over and over again, whether it's in, education roles or executive director roles. And although there are some other points where, whether it's IT or facilities, the data does vary. It's interesting to think about, what does it mean when you have, males earning a certain level and then the, glass escalator, they kind of bypass some of the women in the field to then earn more, even though, the women are just as qualified for positions. So I wanted to do a very quick, I know I'm running slightly over, run over very quickly. The cool thing about the salary survey for NEMA is that it not only looks at salaries, but it looks at benefits as well, which is really exciting. And, what your institution is offering folks and how you can think about your job postings in terms of, what are you giving your employees that, that they need really, right? Like we all need healthcare. And one very important thing too is also parental leave and family benefits. I know Rhode Island, as of the 2019 survey, I think Rhode Island was the only state at the time to have kind of that PFML, but Massachusetts and Connecticut are now part of it. So I expect, as Heather Riggs is finalizing all the data right now, I expect this pie chart to shift, and I'll be curious to see the data kind of when we get that information back. AAMD, similarly has been tracking this information as well. So NEMA is not an anomaly in terms of, finding parental leave data. And I think as we think about parental leave, it's not just the birthing mother, but is it the father? Is it adopted parents? Is it foster parents? And like, who are we identifying as parents in the workplace? And how is your institution really thinking holistically about what it means to be a parent? And I'll admit I'm biased because I'm a mom. So coming soon, the NEMA 2024 salary survey. Heather Riggs is on the call, and I know she's hard at work on it as we get ready for our upcoming NEMA conference this November. But thanks for going into some of the data with me, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Elise.
Thank you. Yeah, I think some of our information will overlap a little bit here. So I'll start by briefly talking about perceptions of gender within the workplace and how that can unconsciously seep into language, in the language of our job postings, and then get to the language itself. So when thinking about women in the workplace, the American collective consciousness typically accepts women's activities that emphasize service or caretaking roles. Think nursing, education, childcare. When women serve in these capacities, these roles feel comfortable and familiar to us. They are the extension of how we define the feminine, sensitive, gentle, deferent, selfless. These are all, again, extensions of mother even. So there is safety in her banality, and we feel comforted and reassured. But when a woman exhibits leadership qualities, typically associated with male behavior, something about her womanness becomes off-putting, prickly, and uncomfortable. We find her unsettling or abrasive. Meanwhile, men are celebrated for their decisiveness, their directness, and even in some cases, aggression. So this is how our society has evolved to view the masculine versus feminine in the workplace. But what about those who are non-binary? How do men versus women versus non-binary folks take in and comprehend a job posting when they're looking to take on a new role? In our work, we unknowingly utilize these terms that reinforce these sort of traditional gender norms, and as a result, create significant barriers for those who do not identify with a specific binary or gendered identities. When this happens, organizations are sending subtle cues about their internal working culture and values, subtly signaling whether they are courting male or female candidates for a particular role. This often leaves very qualified, non-binary individuals wondering whether they should even apply at all. In addition, some stipulations, such as inflexible working hours, can inadvertently exclude many qualified candidates, especially those with caregiving duties, typically women within our society. So how do we avoid this? What might this language look like in a job posting? According to the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, the following words tend to reflect the accepted norms of masculine leadership behavior and are typically listed in descriptions with organizations that are seeking a male candidate. So these are typically leadership roles. Superior, lead, decisive, independently, confident, challenging, determined, dominant, competitive, and boasting are just a few. And then conversely, the following list tends to represent more universally accepted female characteristics and norms in a job posting, typically non-leadership roles. Committed, connected, cooperative, dependable, loyal, responsible, supportive, trustworthy or trustworthy, and considerate. So gender still matters in perceptions of leadership abilities. Perceived aggressiveness or amiability all still weigh heavily in our collective consciousness when judging candidates for an open position in our organization or when searching for a new job. So gender equity issues are complex and rooted in larger systemic societal issues that we as museum folks cannot solve alone. However, our organizations can create more inclusive job descriptions using gender neutral language and titles, clearly stating their commitment to diversity and inclusion, and outlining specific accommodations or flexible work options. They can also avoid listing unnecessary qualifications that might deter a diverse range of applicants and instead focus on the core competencies and skills required for the role. Additionally, providing a transparent overview of the recruitment process and offering to make reasonable adjustments for candidates can further demonstrate an organization's dedication to inclusivity and therefore broaden their applicant pool and create a team with pluralistic perspectives, which will be reflected in the museum's later work product. One tool that can help with this is the gender decoder. So seen on your screen here, yep, there it is. For any job posting you may have come up, place the text in the text box and the decoder will break down the posting and tell you whether your ad is, quote, strongly feminine coded, masculine coded, or neutral. It'll even show you how many times a particular word has been used and where it leans on the gender spectrum. It's a pretty fabulous tool. Okay, so with that, thank you very much, and I'll hand it over to Lori.
Hi, everybody. How are you today? I am looking for my controls. There we go. So now that we have looked at and understanding a little bit of kind of our language, which is really important, as well as the salaries, which aren't always as high as we'd like them to be when thinking about posting or describing a new role at our organization, whether it's volunteer or a higher level staff position. It's really also important to understand what's going on out in the market today and how people actually are looking for jobs if they want jobs. In this post-COVID environment, there's a recognition that there's more at stake. There's more at competition. That you know, people who are looking for a role are really looking something that fits their personal needs, right? Career growth hasn't really kind of been the priority of the last 4 or 5 years in a post-COVID time. I'm going to go post-COVID because I actually recently had COVID. But in a moment of the world that we're in, people are putting their personal needs ahead of perhaps their career. So when they're looking at things like, they're really gonna take a few things off the, a few opportunities off the list because they're like, you know what, that really doesn't fit my personal needs anymore. Maybe their career jumps or relocating doesn't really fit what they want in their life right now. And what does that mean for you as an employer or who's looking for more help? Well, it kind of means that you need to be a bit more open to hiring people that don't meet every single job requirement that you have. The quote unquote unicorn doesn't often exist when you're posting your jobs. And that means like a perfect employee to fit your perfectly long described job, right? So people are looking for companies or organizations that really kind of value their whole self and really provide more support in achieving work-life balance. For those of us who have worked in museums, who have worked in the nonprofit life, we know that majority of us are absolutely dedicated and passionate about what we do. We're not always doing it for a salary, although that would be nice. We're doing it because we're committed to the mission, the vision, and the values of the organization that serves the community that we also either are a part of or really want to show some benefit to. That often leads to the burnout. And so it's really important for an organization or a company to value that work-life balance in the organization as your leaders, the board, wherever it may be, to help provide support for employees who feel that passion, but don't often kind of know where that balance might be. You want to keep them there. Tenure is great. Long tenure is great, especially when you find great humans to be a part of your organization. And so how do you find those people, right? You're going to have to liven up the job posts, folks, right? If we're looking at a long list of requirements and tasks and all of these things, we have to be able to lift 75 pounds. We have to be willing to work nights and weekends. Like, I'm not gonna lie, but maybe that's not so enticing anymore. So how can we actually attract people to the roles that are open, whether it's volunteer or staff? We really have to liven up our descriptions of them. We've got to translate internal documents and internal needs to be able to market ourselves in a very competitive job market these days. And so how do we actually do that? So first of all, we're going to go a little bit over 3 types of how one would talk about a job, the ones that are internal and external. So first thing is a job description. A job description is an internal document. It describes the absolute perfection of the execution of the role, and it is a legal document for your organization. It includes all of the things, right? I'm talking like sometimes these are like 10 pages long. They've got all of the daily duties, the work environment, they've got the expected number of hours of work. It really is a very long-lasting document that should really be reflected upon during internal reviews of the person who was hired, right? This is the entire list of expectations and describes 100% success. Now, does that always happen? No. And it's a great opportunity for, an employee or an employer to have that conversation or update the document that's on file at the organization if necessary. So a job description is internal. A job post, which the wonderful New England Museum Association and the Connecticut League and the American Alliance of Museums, AASLH, all those places that people go to search for jobs, is a job post. This is an external document. It is something that is going to attract your perfect slate of candidates, right? Yes, absolutely. They all exist out there, all those unicorns, right? But it's what you read on these job boards. Now, this is the first impression that a candidate has of your organization. So what do we want to put in it, right? We're going to want to put the title. We're going to put a little bit about you as the organization, a summary, an overview, some responsibilities and duties, criteria, location, salary, benefits, compensation information, and maybe who that person reports to, right? It can get long, but we prefer to keep them short and sweet because how many people are going to read a 10-page HR likely job description, right? A job advertisement is a marketing asset, right? It's something that is going to catch your attention really quick. It's got a catchy line and how to apply or where to find more information. Here's two great examples of a job ad or an advertisement, right? There is no long list of tasks here. There's no full-on job description, but it really kind of gives you an idea of the organization, right? You can learn a lot by the visuals here, by the small amount of text that they've included. There is an apply by date. There is a name of the organization that you can find, generally a phone number, an email, a website, etc. So this is a job ad. So ad, post, and description are three very, very different things. So how do you even begin to start to write something that's going to attract candidates in a challenging market in this day and time? So I suggest to boil it down to 7 questions. So the first thing overall is to describe your organization's contribution to the world and how this open role, volunteer or paid, helps make it happen, right? So first question, how do you describe your organization? What change do you want to see in the world and the culture at your organization? So for example, let's say the Wadsworth Athenaeum, since we just brought up the Wadsworth Athenaeum earlier about, their first salary story in the 70s, right? The Wadsworth Athenaeum here in Hartford, Connecticut is the oldest art museum in America. Our collections are wide ranging, and we're committed to representing art in the world and giving a great experience to lots of people, right? I have no idea what their vision is or their mission is, but what change do they want to see in the world? Do they want to expose the greatest amount of art to people? Do they want them to have a wonderful experience and come back time and time again? Do they want to make their life better with art, right? What's the change that the Wadsworth maybe wants to see people in the world? I don't have that answer, but it's fun to consider, right? And how will this role contribute to the opportunity to make that change of exposing art to more people in the world and changing their lives, right? Is it a visitor services role? Is it someone that's really going to have to care for the people who walk through the museum? Is it a collections role? Is it a volunteer role where all you're doing is greeting folks when they're walking through the door and showing them around? Is it it could be anything. Is it a finance role, accounting role? It's really important to understand how this role contributes to that change. Be clear on who and what you're looking for. What is your ideal candidate, right? So this now actually describes the candidate that you're looking for. Ask them questions. Do you enjoy speaking with people? Do you enjoy something that's fast-paced and constantly building things? Do you enjoy never sitting at a desk, right? Ask them questions and then prioritize. When we come to that long list of responsibilities and tasks that these jobs actually, consist of, prioritize, right? What are the 5 main things that this role is responsible for, right? And we're talking about tasks, right? We're not talking about the greater good of other duties beyond the role. Prioritize only listing 5 tasks. And then when you go to the responsibility, or not responsibilities, but the abilities that that person needs to have, when you list the education and the strengths and the skills that you're looking for, what does this candidate actually need to have in order to do those 5 prioritized tasks, right? Boil it down. Do they really need a master's degree to greet people at the front door? Do they really need to have 10 years of experience to upload collections items into a database? Or is it something that can be taught in the job, right? Really kind of back this up and understand what you're looking for those tasks and the abilities and opportunities that this person might be able to learn in the role. And then dream about the success that you're going to have together. So what does success look like for the candidate right now? And how could it evolve in the future? And then what could they learn when they're with you and how they could grow? So these 7 questions kind of really start to boil down what you really will attract people with in a job post. It is not a long HR description. It is not a very, very short ad, but it really kind of makes your organization, number one, marketed, right? A little bit better because this is a marketing opportunity, but also markets the role. In museums and in nonprofits, we struggle sometimes with, paying high-level salaries or flexible work hours or remote work opportunities. We are a customer service organization. We need to be present for the visitors who show, and we do have confined budgets. So how can you make this job sound as appealing as possible for the passionate person that you're likely looking for? And so with that, a really fun, if marketing isn't your deal and you're really kind of struggling to rewrite the job post, get yourself some great materials, right? Either number one, phone a friend, right? Have someone write a draft of your job post for you. Be authentic, be realistic, encourage learning. Everybody wants to grow in their careers. Maybe it's not top 10 priority, but they do want to grow and enjoy and be challenged and feel like they're a success. And make this candidate, your organization's hero when they're coming in. They're new. They want to feel like they have some responsibility, and that you want to encourage their long-term growth. A really great marketing tool, a very simple book, is Don Miller's Building a Story Brand, which is, if you think about your role, being actually having to be marketed, right, out in a competitive hiring world right now, give yourself a little bit of tool. This book is great. It's very simple and straightforward. And with that, I believe I will turn it over to Amris.
Well, thank you so much. I think there are so many different resources. I was taking a lot of notes on like what's going to go in the follow-up email and what we're going to put on our jobs page. I just kind of wanted to offer some kind of closing thoughts of some things that I take away from this, and then I really want to open it up to as many questions as you all have out there. I mean, I think one of the things that I always think about, and I think it's important, as a historian, I'm always thinking about like, what are the historical forces that led us to this moment where, we see these gender inequities, but also thinking about the museum field itself and a lot of the ways in which, and this is not unique to the museum field, but the nonprofit sector, of social service organizations, ideas about these as being gendered female jobs there, and along going with that, one of the things that you get is, historically with the idea of like a sole male breadwinner as being the person who has the high salary and the health care and the pension and retirement benefits and things like that. And that there are other kinds of work that perhaps the wife in that partnership can do that's less remunerated, but are passion projects. And I think this is often the model that we fall into in thinking about many things. I mean, there are ways in which this is true in the academic job market as well. A lack of the field kind of catching up with where society is in terms of two breadwinner households, or perhaps sole breadwinner households where, perhaps it is the woman who is bringing home the money, a single mom, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's just important as a historian to kind of recognize some of those legacies and the way that they shape a field. There's lots of gender history that we could go into on this, but there's no time. I wanted to also think a little bit about one of the things that I have found. I mean, we've posted opportunities, and I don't think any of them were as great as they could have been if I had followed Lori's 7 questions. But, when we started hiring people, I started doing a lot of reading of the jobs boards themselves. And I would just say that this is a great thing to do if you're thinking about posting an opportunity, whether it's a paid opportunity as a part-time or full-time position with your organization, or a volunteer opportunity. And thinking about volunteer opportunities as jobs is probably a good way of thinking about them too, that offers clarity to both the potential volunteer and to your organization and what you're going to do together. But I think it's really interesting to just sort of read the range of job postings that are out there. And you will get a sense very quickly of what are the ones that are like, oh, that sounds like a great job. Oh, that sounds like a job that I would not want to have. And I think that that kind of research in just kind of what's out there in the landscape can be so educational. And now what I want to do is like take a bunch of job ads and post them through Elise's tool to see about gendered language and things like that. That was not a tool that I knew about when I was posting our positions. And then I guess the other thing, one of the things that we've done on our job board is, make it a requirement to include salary and compensation information. Since we have 3 amazing people here, could you each say a little bit about why including compensation information in your job postings is so important? Elise, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah. So this is really important because this allows qualified candidates to look at the job and determine whether or not that median salary, what's being listed there, is appropriate for them and their lifestyles and what their expectations are. If you're posting a job that doesn't have a salary listed, your folks who want to know at least what the median is won't even bother applying. They won't even finish reading your ad. So they are automatically excluding themselves just based on that alone. And then secondly, it already sets a standard of expectations between both the applicant and the organization who is looking for someone new to fulfill a role. So yes, salaries, incredibly important.
It's also actually the law now in several states. I added to the chat a Forbes article which came out in June, which is updating folks on the new pay transparency laws that are across the nation. Connecticut does have one. I can't quote it right now, so I'm not even going to try because I'm probably going to mess it up. But number one, yes, it is a legal requirement. So if you are posting on a national job board, like the American Alliance of Museums or the American Association of State and Local History, it's really important to know across the nation that, yes, number one, they require a salary range being posted because it is the law. The second thing is, yes, it's important for the candidates to know so they can negotiate as well as, understand what they're coming into. As the person posting the job, you're going to save a lot of time. If someone already knows like what the salary range is, you're not going to be wasting your time on candidates who aren't interested in your salary. So number one, it saves you time. Number two, what it does is forces you as an employer, as a business, to start to standardize your salaries and wages, sometimes even by let's say more entry, middle, and higher level roles. And if everybody's kind of aware what everybody else is making, then you're kind of dealing with a more number one, equitable workplace, but also something where there's not really a whole lot of drama. But the big thing is it's saving you as someone who is searching for people a lot of time. Post the salaries and the ranges. It's really important to do that, both externally for candidates and then internally for you as the employer. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I echo both Lori and Elise and just say for transparency, right? You have a candidate going in knowing what to expect, and it sets the tone that you're an organization that not only if you're in a state where it's required, but also that you're saying, hey, this is what we have to offer. And, typically data shows that women don't always negotiate. So it's very important to not only negotiate always, no matter your gender, and really just for transparency's sake, I think it's just so crucial. And I dropped a link for AAUW, the Work Smart. They have salary negotiation trainings for women and folks. And I highly, highly recommend it.
And I also popped a resource in the chat that I think is also useful for just thinking about what a living wage looks like in wherever you happen to live. This is a living wage calculator put out by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, but it can be quite eye-opening because I think if you have been in a position for a long time and, depending on where you are in your life stage, Maybe you're looking to purchase your first home. And as everybody knows, like interest rates are crazy right now. Like for someone who's starting out in their career and trying to buy a home and pay a mortgage and like pay off a car or their student loans, like that person needs some, a certain level of income in order to deal with those obligations. If you're someone who's paid off your house and, you have health care and you don't have a lot of debt, that calculation looks a little bit different for you. But I think that, this calculator is useful. It's very eye-opening, I think I would say, especially in a state with a high cost of living like Connecticut. Okay, let's open things. Oh, go ahead, Lori. I'm sorry.
Oh,
And then we'll open it up.
Yeah, no, I think, the cost of living is, here in Connecticut, I don't know where everybody else is, but obviously has risen dramatically over the last several years. And that's actually nationwide. Even in Canada, the cost of living is just, I mean, if I were to tell you what it was in like Kearney, Nebraska at a recent search we did last year, you'd probably be shocked. You're like, where is that? It's in Nebraska.
It's Kearney.
It's
actually.
Kearney, whatever it is. Yeah. It's just kind of like, oh my gosh, like it's almost, if not close to Connecticut, metro area. So, it doesn't really matter where in the world you are right now. It's expensive. And that even it's harder for museums and nonprofits to hire because of that. So the more you can offer candidates, that's not cash, like flexible working environments or unlimited PTO, things like that are going to really entice folks to come work for you along with their passion. So.
And I'll add in, things to think about as you're in the hiring process too, here at NEMA, and my colleagues can chime in, but we did a process where when recently hiring, we were able to redact the names of applicants. And I know for small institutions that can be really tough, but if you have, somebody who's part-time or an intern or, a board member even who's not part of the search process, if they're able to go in and redact some of that information just to make a more equitable hiring process in the initial stages, I think that can be a really beneficial tool too.
Yeah, anything you can do to remove internal bias and make a more objective playing field is, you'll be surprised who you end up with and who you end up talking to. Any questions?
Yeah, what are your questions, folks? I also had that poll, Scarlett, if you want me to do that at any point. It was just like, no, we're good.
Feel free to drop anything in the chat too if you don't want to speak. I think that's okay, right, Amherst?
Yeah, that's fine. Heidi, you direct messaged me with this. Is it okay if I share it with the group? Yes, okay, great. So Heidi says, we're looking into benefits for the first time, and we will be looking to fill 2 positions in the very near future. What benefits are good to start with or are most sought after? And what are good resources for finding options?
Vacation, Heidi, vacation. That's a good question. Scarlett, anybody? I mean,
yeah, I was actually almost going to turn it like Heather, if you're listening in, I don't know if you have any feedback on what you're seeing coming through our job postings in terms of benefits, but I imagine it would probably be, I don't know, I'd say healthcare, but that's
my first thing, this is Heather, by the way, is health insurance. For someone that is not married, health insurance is key. And that's like the biggest thing for me. I mean, it's like vacation time and PTO and all that is great, but I want health insurance.
Yeah. And I would say, Heidi, we recently, had some healthcare benefits for the first time at the league. There are groups that you can work with out there that work specifically with very small businesses with a small number of employees and offer a range of different plans, kind of basically just based on, like the person's age. Everything from high deductible plans to more, sort of PPO network plans with some of the major insurers. So it's out there. And if you want to follow up with me afterwards, I'd be happy to share the group that we had worked with when we were offering ours.
Another option to benefits that, if the organization really can't take that on, I feel like there's so many flexible options these days that it's really nice to at least explore them. Because those insurers are, it's messy, and even in the easiest ways, insurance and benefits are complicated. I know smaller businesses that I've spoken with, even for-profit businesses, will often just offer a monthly stipend for someone to go and purchase their own health insurance or add dental or eye or, an emergency plan that just might really tackle ER visits, things like that. There's a lot of options out there on the when they do the open enrollment. I can't speak to benefits substantially, but I know people do appreciate at least a monthly stipend in terms of that support. If you choose to do that, you should be able to offer that across the entire organization. So it's not just someone who wants to negotiate it. For example, like if let's say I have health insurance through my spouse, but the organization offers another person basically a free $300 a month to have some type of health benefit, why don't I have that benefit too? That's essentially like a cash bonus for the month that should be used to health benefits. I could be able to use that towards, let's say, a yoga class or some other, I don't know, maybe trying to think of something else that's maybe a little offbeat, but some other type of health benefit to me, mental, emotional, or physical. So just consider what that might cause in the workplace if you choose to offer like a monthly stipend for health benefits.
I would say self-growth opportunities, getting to attend conferences, not having to pay for a conference is huge. And the things that, I've learned from attending, especially the NEMA conference, has been just life-changing for me in a lot of different ways and in my many different roles. And so having to ask just for the time off, let alone for an organization to cover some or all of the costs, can incite a lot of anxiety for employees. So offering something like this as a benefit is huge, absolutely huge.
And I'd hop on, yes, Elise, absolutely. And note that if you're offering it to one person, you also need to offer it to the other. One thing that I saw at a recent with my recent employer is that they offered you a stipend of $500 for the year to do whatever type of professional development. This is an example. Like you can choose whether you want to take 10 different webinars to pay for them, a membership at a particular organization, but it was $500 to use at your disposal. Now that's certainly not going to pay for a couple of nights in Newport at the NEMA conference, but at least going in, this opportunity is afforded to you and this is what you have. And then anything else can be taken on above that. So if you offer to one, offer to all.
Eileen, you had a question. Go ahead.
My question was like around this, like three, the job ad, the job post, the role description. At what point do you like kind of make that switch over to the role description, which does give a lot of the detail? Is that sort of after a first interview? We tend to base our performance evaluations are kind of based off the role. So it's an important doc for people to have before they take a final offer, certainly.
Oh, absolutely. I would say, you put the post out, you start to kind of assemble, depending on what your process is, right? Like you're going to look through resumes, CVs, things like that. You're going to bring people in for an initial screening or maybe some phone calls, like a half an hour initial screening to make sure they're still interested, number one, right? Sometimes they've moved on to something else by the time you get to talk to them. And I would say it's at the point where you want them to come in for an interview. You want to meet with them in person. You want to, involve more of your hiring committee, more than just one, initial conversation. That's a really good question. But I would at least say it's that second interview, that second conversation post screening.
Okay. So yeah, after screening, but before interview.
Yeah. You don't want to kind of turn them off while they're in front of you and they be like, oh, well, here's the full job description. And they're like, whoa, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Give them the opportunity to back out and save you both some time.
I have a
one thing I would
question.
add is, we explored, or we for a few years did the QSC HRAs, which were like a version of that stipend, monthly stipend. But we actually ended up moving away from that because it sort of made it very complicated for people who were using the marketplace to secure insurance. So, at least, the next year we made our kind of added into compensation that total amount. Because with the Affordable Care Act, there are some decent private options. The challenge being, is who knows where that is, what the future of that is, depending on, sort of what happens in November. So, that's just one thing we did use that. It is a great way of getting pre-tax, like a pre-tax stipend to your employees, but it does kind of go right against their, it is taken out of their subsidy for the Affordable Care Act plans.
Yeah, and here in Connecticut, another thing that's kind of in the mix, in addition to the the paid leave that Scarlett was talking about earlier, is there's my CT Savings. There's like a statewide retirement plan that employers can, if they don't offer a retirement plan themselves, it offers employees the opportunity. The employer can decide whether they want to match things or not, and whether they're able to. But it does set up an infrastructure that makes it pretty easy for organizations, especially small ones, to give their employees a Roth that they can contribute to, basically, through their paychecks. And that I think it's something that can move with them from job to job in Connecticut as well. So that's something that I was really gratified to see, because I think, health benefits are one thing. Then if you want to start doing like, 401k type things, that's like a whole nother level of complexity. So this is a nice thing, especially for small employers in Connecticut. Other questions? We have a couple of minutes.
This is another option. Generationally, there are some a little bit of differences, but we do My CT Savings, and then we also have a simple IRA. And a simple IRA, it's only a match of 1 to 3% annually, but it's like that again, that difference between when the money is, how it's taxed. So, so people who are getting a little closer to retirement age sort of seem to want to reduce their income through a simple IRA as opposed to My CT Savings. But I think, people at the beginning of their careers who can put money into a Roth and have, those taxes paid at that time, it's great. So, but there are a lot of little options that are for smaller museums.
I don't know if this is the right place or time, but we've just recently found that if you have a certain number of employees that make over a certain amount, you have to actually, by law in Connecticut now, offer an IRA. And so My CT Savings is something that we've just started to look at because it takes the processing off of us. The problem with it is, having, as an orchestra, we have per service employees. And so they actually have to go in and opt out of it, which makes it annoying as all get out, but it is something that you do have to do if you have a certain number of employees that make, I think it's 5,000. I don't even know. So it's just, one of those things. But
and we have the paid health sick leave that's coming up too. That is going to be really tricky. Following that to see sort of how that's going to affect. Also, employers that may have a lot of employees, but they don't all work regularly, so kind of where those thresholds are going to be. It's all really good stuff. It just has added an administrative burden to especially smaller organizations, but it's all good stuff. So
all things we really want, need, and love in the world, but it's a little bit if you don't have the infrastructure to support the setup of a lot of this, and and the affordability of it is different too. I definitely look wherever you are in the world, there's generally a a resource nonprofit association such as in Connecticut, and we have the Connecticut Nonprofit Alliance, I believe. And is that right, Amrose?
Yeah.
You know, there's something out there where you could call someone and say, I need some resources on X, especially for nonprofits. Sometimes we skirt around in terms of staff sizes and whatnot. So we just want to make sure that we're all absolutely following the law. I'm sure our boards would all love that. And you know, the awareness of it too, right? Like, how often do I see, you know, paid leave law articles come across my desk? Probably that's not coming up in my Facebook feed, you know, so it's hard to keep up with all of the changes. That's for sure. There's a lot going on.
Well, I can see a follow-up program kind of focusing on those Connecticut programs too. Maybe the Nonprofit Alliance has someone we could work with to offer something like that, because I know when all of that was coming through, and like our payroll processor would also send us like these scary like marketing pressure emails that were like, are you in compliance with the new laws? You know, and I would be like, I don't know. Are we? Do I have to pay ADP to do this, or can I do it myself? You know, it's very confusing, and that landscape, especially if you're entering it for the first time as a really small organization that's starting to hire or trying to like do more to raise the tide for all boats in the field. It can be so confusing, and you have no idea who to call. So we empathize with that feeling. So, you know, I think this is something to think about for future programs or collaborations that we could do. We are just over 1 minute past 1. I want to thank our presenters and guests today, especially Scarlett, Elise, and Lori. Thank you so much for sharing your ideas, your expertise, your input. I'm hoping that we'll be able to do some follow-up programming on this, because one of the things that I know that we talked about in our prep for this was like, what are those points where bias can be introduced in the review process, and how could you work to eliminate some of those? So, you know, I think we'll be gathering some resources for this, putting them on our page and sharing them all with you along with the recording afterwards. But, you know, we'll also be sending out a program survey, which I hope all of you who are in attendance will fill out. And if you have ideas for a future program or a follow-up that you'd like to see along these lines or along any other lines, we'd really love to hear about it. Thank you again for being here. And a special thanks especially to Lori, Elise, and Scarlett, and to NEMA for the great work that they do to really help us understand our field here in New England. Have a great afternoon, everyone.